Hello everyone, it's Nicole Steele, the owner and designer of thejoyfulstamper.com. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, and today I am going to show you how I turned Split Coast Stampers' weekly card sketch into this card right here. Each week on my blog, on every Saturday, I post the sketch. That is the sketch challenge from Splitcoaststampers.com. I love playing along with that. And I also have a written PDF and I do this video. So hopefully I've covered all the ways that people enjoy learning about how to make a card and how to stamp. So today I have a neat embossing trick for you. Embossing folders can do more than just put a pretty texture under your cardstock, and I'm going to show you how I got this debossed ink design here. So let's get started. I'm going to move my ink pads out of the way and put that card over to the side. So we're going to start with Petal Pink. Petal Pink and Just Jade are the color schemes for this. I've done some of the prep work ahead of time. But first I'm going to show you how I did that embossing trick. So I'm using the Winter Snow Embossing Folder that's in Stampin' Up's 2020 Holiday Mini Catalog. And I'm going to open it up. So you'll notice one side has the Stampin' Up! Logo on it. And when you open it up, that side with the Stampin' Up! Logo is a flatter surface. The opposite side, the one that does not have that Stampin' Up! Logo, has a raised surface. And you can see the snowflake pattern there. I'm going to gently take a Petal Pink ink pad and I'm going to tap it very lightly on that raised non-logoed side of this cardstock. And I want to be very light with this. Hold the folder open and I'm just tapping it very lightly onto this folder here. I'm going to close the ink pad. Then what I'm going to do is take my Petal Pink cardstock and I'm going to lay it on this embossing folder where I have it inked. And I'm going to close it. And then I'm going to bring in my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. And my cutting plates. Now for this particular one, we're doing embossing. So our sandwich is going to be base plate 1, plate 3, the standard embossing folder with the hinge side going into the machine first, and then I'm going to put plate number 3 on top. And now I'm going to run it through. Okay. We'll come back to the embossing machine in a bit. And now I'll take my cardstock out of here. And when I flip it over, you'll see that the ink went into the debossed sides. Now, when you're done doing this particular technique, you're going to want to clean your embossing folder right away. So if you have a damp paper towel or some baby wipes nearby, go ahead and use those to wipe the ink off your embossing folder so that it doesn't stain. But by putting the ink on the raised side of that embossing folder, it pushes the ink down into this cardstock. So if you notice on this side, this is actually the embossed or the raised pattern on the cardstock. We did the opposite. The ink pushed down into the crevices of those snowflakes. So it's giving us this nice highlighted look to those snowflakes that I really, really like. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next steps of our card. And we can actually glue that to the front of our card here. And we'll just use some regular old liquid glue for that. This Petal Pink color, it reminds me of just vintage, has a vintage vibe to it. So I like using it whenever I want to make cards that have that effect or that mood to them. One of my favorite color combinations is Petal Pink and Soft Suede or Petal Pink and Early Espresso. I just love those two colors together. Okay, so now we have our background. I love that trick with the embossing folder. So many things you can do. Okay, now we're going to do some more die cutting. So what I did is I ran a piece of Whisper White cardstock through that same Winter Snow Embossing Folder. It's kind of hard to see because it's white. And I also took a Just Jade scrap piece of cardstock and ran it through the Winter Snow Embossing Folder. And what I'm going to do is die cut these into snowflakes. I wanted just a little hint of texture on that cardstock and on my snowflakes. So that's why I'm doing that first. Let me bring back in my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. Now, if you're watching this in September of 2020, I am running a special where if you buy one of these machines from me in my store, shop.nicole.stampinup.net, you can choose any embossing folder for free. All you need to do is place your order in my store and then email me which embossing folder you'd like. If you add on the magnetic cutting plate, then I will also send you a package of Stampin' Dimensionals. Okay, so we're going to go with some of the more intricate snowflakes here. And let me see, this one I want on here, and then we want a slightly smaller one right there. So these dies are coming from the So Many Snowflakes dies, and you'll find it in the Stampin' Up! 2020 Winter Catalog. My third plate. There we go. I've got that on top, and I'm going to run it through. Now, what I like about the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine is that I'm finding that even with intricate dies, it's cutting all those little pieces out on the first pass through. I'll show you what I mean. Taking this off. So now you don't have to go back and forth anymore when you're die cutting. I'll have to poke that one out. Do you see that? All those little chads came out of there, just one pass through. No more dryer sheets, no more going back and forth multiple times. One cut through does it all. And this one, if this happens where it gets stuck in your, what do you call it, in this little die cut here, all you have to do is take your paper piercer and poke it out. But I have to go grab mine. I seem to be missing it. Okay, here we go. Just take your pick or paper piercer or whatever sharp you have on hand and just poke through the holes in the back of the die and it'll come right out. There we go. Okay, now we're also going to use felt. I'm going to set these aside. I want to show you this felt. In the Stampin' Up! Holiday Mini Catalog, there's a festive felt pack, and it comes with Real Red, Just Jade, Early Espresso, and Whisper White. We're going to make some Just Jade snowflakes to put on our card today. And this felt is nice and thick, so it'll hold its shape really good. Now, what I have found is that it doesn't work so well with intricate dies. So like those snowflakes I just die cut, they're not going to cut through this felt very well. But those open frame type dies, they work just perfectly with. So I'm going to make my sandwich, and I'm going to let me line my plates up here, and I'm going to put my felt down on there, and I'm going to grab the largest snowflake die and place it on that felt, and I'm going to grab the smallest snowflake die and put it on that felt. I'm going to try to conserve some space here, so I'm going to scoot it over there, and then I'm going to put plate number 3 on top and run it through. Now that sounds completely normal in a die cutting machine. It just means it's cutting. So it's nothing to be worried about. Remove these frames. And your snowflakes will punch right out of the felt. Now be careful whenever you go to pull them out. You don't want to tear them. And if you find you have just the slightest little bit of pieces sticking, just take some paper snips and just snip it away so that it releases it. And there's one right there too. Get that out. There we go. Okay, all good. I like that little bit of soft texture that the felt adds to the card. So I think it's so fun to use and to experiment with different textures. Okay, I already went ahead and die cut out a petal pink snowflake. So we've got our pile of snowflakes here. And now I'm going to go ahead and stamp a sentiment. So I'm going to use our friendship is one of a kind, but I only want that saying one of a kind. So you have two options here. If you have a little Stampin' Cube or Stampin' Spot like I have here, they come in our monthly Paper Pumpkin subscription kits, or you can buy them uninked in the annual catalog and use your reinkers to make them whatever color you want. These are small enough that you actually can just dab right on the part of the sentiment that you want. If you have a full-size ink pad, just go ahead and ink this whole sentiment up and stamp it on your cardstock, because I'm going to actually fussy cut and trim around the one-of-a-kind sentiment anyways. So it doesn't matter if I ink up and stamp more of the sentiment than I'm actually going to use. I'm going to cut it away anyways. A lot of people like getting those a lot of people like getting those monthly Paper Pumpkin kits solely because of those little ink cubes. They're especially handy if you're working with a stamp positioner tool, like a Stamparatus, because you can ink your stamps up that are on the lid of the stamp positioning tool and it doesn't get all over the lid. So there's less ink to clean up. So those little cubes have become quite popular, and that's why Stampin' Up! Added them to the catalog uninked, so that you could make them whatever color you wanted them to be. And with my paper snips, I am just churning the paper as I'm cutting. I'm not getting too particular about getting very deeply into this sentiment. I just want to trim out that one of a kind. That's all. And it's easier to turn your paper than to turn your stamps when you're doing this. Okay, so we've got that done. We can lay the paper snips aside. And now we're going to start assembling this card. This is where the fun comes in. I find that working with felt, the glue dots worked better. When you're using liquid glue, because this felt is absorbent, the glue gets sucked into the felt and then it just doesn't, there's nothing there to stick to the paper. So that's why I like using glue dots with felt. And I'm going to gently pull it off because I don't want to tear that felt. You can use a take your pick tool if you need to get it to come off. Now on this larger snowflake, I'm actually going to put several of them on. So while I'm doing this, I'd like to know, do you guys like to start making cards with a sketch? Do you find that helpful? I know for myself, I almost always start with a card sketch. Just knowing how I'm going to lay everything out just makes the design process so much easier for me. So finding a card sketch to begin with just really cuts down on the amount of time I sit there thinking and thinking and thinking, like, what am I going to do? Now I'm opening up a soft suede ink pad, and I wanted to sort of vintageize, is that a word? This petal pink snowflake. So I'm taking a Stampin' sponge, and I cut my Stampin' sponges into 8 sections. It makes them easier to hold, and it's more economical. And I'm just lightly brushing some soft suede color onto that snowflake, just to give it a bunch of, I don't know, make it look a little older than it actually is. Not a look I want for myself personally, right? But hey, getting older is a gift. I am finding that to be true. Do you guys find that to be true? Because there's something to be said for gaining experience and wisdom as you get older. And again, I'm using a glue dot to adhere this because since I'm going to be gluing it to the felt, and I have found the liquid glue just doesn't work as well. Okay, now we've got these really pretty embossed snowflakes. Can you see the very subtle Winter Snow embossing on there? I know sometimes it's one of those things where it's like, okay, am I the only one that notices it? The person that I give this card to, are they really going to notice that little bit of detail? Who knows? Some people might not. But the point is, I know it's there, and I had fun making it, right? Now, I will admit, I did a little looser interpretation of this week's Splitcoaststampers sketch. The original sketch, which I actually have on my blog and I have in the thumbnail to this YouTube video, it's actually a line of circles going down the middle, or diagonally down the middle of the card. And I sort of did a loose interpretation of it, and I'm doing snowflakes. But that's the beauty of a sketch. It's meant to be a jumping off point for inspiration and just going wherever it takes you. Okay, I'm not really sure where I want that one. I think I want it a little bit down like that. There we go. Now it has to stick. Sometimes you might just have to hold it down a little bit when you're using liquid glue. Give it some pressure for a few seconds. Now we are going to use mini dimensionals to adhere that one-of-a-kind sentiment. And these are really tiny, which is perfect for a small spot like this. And I'm going to see if I can get one in that middle there too. Yep, that fits good. And now I'm going to try and peel these off. They are really tiny, but it sure beats cutting full-size Stampin' Dimensionals in half like I used to do before these came along. And now I'm going to adhere this right on the bottom of my card, just like that. We're not finished yet, though. Stampin' Up! Has these gorgeous champagne rhinestone basic jewels in our annual catalog, and I couldn't help but dress this card up with them. Vintage look with champagne rhinestones, I think that's a winner. Oh yes. And we're just gonna scatter some. We need a few more. Can never have enough. Never, never. And I think I'll do one more over here. There we go. And that is this week's Splitcoaststampers Saturday sketch card. Splitcoaststampers actually posts the sketch on Wednesday on its website, and I post what I've made with it on Saturday. So thank you for joining me today. If you are liking these videos, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so that you're always notified when a new one of my videos comes up. And if you would like any of the supplies for the card that I made today, I would so appreciate you shopping my store, shopwithnicole.stampinup.net. I strive really hard to be the demonstrator that you want me to be, and I so love bringing these ideas and sharing things with you. So thank you so much for joining me today. All right, bye.